Rob, who is he, him, it looks like identifies as an atheist, and wants to talk about Numbers 5, the abortion ritual. It says, there is a fungus that grows on wheat and would be present in the temple. Counters anyone arguing against abortion from the Bible. So, hey, Rob, tell us about what's going on in Numbers 5.
Hi. So, as we all know, one of the key components of the abortion ritual in Numbers 5 is to take dirt from the temple floor. The temple is where they brought all their offerings, meat, grain especially, and ergot is a naturally occurring fungus that grows on cereal crops. And we know that we've actually been using it for literal millennia in obstetrics, and one of the things it can cause is miscarriage.
Huh.
Yep. Also, migraine treatments. It was used for a long time in treatment of migraines, but we stopped using it because it causes a slew of other side effects as well. And so it's like not the best thing to use in general. But yeah, it's possible that, this was used for that purpose back then.
Yeah, interesting. And definitely that like an all-powerful and all-knowing God would oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, please.
Oh, just the idea of an all-powerful and all-knowing God, if he is instructing you to do something that could potentially cause miscarriage, seems odd that he would be so upset by abortions if he's doing something that could potentially cause a spontaneous abortion. But what were you going to say?
It seems odd. It seems as though intentionality, like we know that this exists, we can test it, we use it in medicine. There's no way God wouldn't know that.
Yeah, you would think.
Yeah, I mean, with that particular topic, I have some questions about because I know there are intentional abortions mentioned in the Bible. There is intentional commands to terminate pregnancy in the Bible. I wonder, with that specific wording from that verse, I wonder how much of that was like intentionally going for miscarriage. Because I know with the temple, with the dirt on the temple floor, while it could contain ergot, like poisoning, I don't know if that particular verse is hinting that it's intentionally being used for that. Or that it's intentionally like known that substance would be in the soil that they would be eating. But I do think that there are definitely other examples where they do mention, for example, there's a compound at one point that is likely copper containing and used like for the purpose of terminating pregnancy or especially preventing implantation of a fetus. So yeah, there's definitely examples.
It's so interesting how many of the natural elements that exist on the planet can cause our bodies to miscarry and to cause us to have negative reactions for completely odd, mundane reasons. We use copper all the time. You can cook with it, but if you have it inside your body, it can cause problems. It's very interesting that the natural world seems to align with theist ideas for all these various things, but like actually a lot of it's really hostile to our ongoing livelihoods.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pregnancies in general are very difficult to maintain. They're very difficult to have go well. People that think that pregnancy is just an easy, straightforward process are very misunderstanding of everything that happens. Miscarriage is incredibly common, and there's a lot of times you might miscarry and not even know, because you could have a zygote or a gestation that is barely past stages of conception and then not implant, and then that would be a miscarriage that you just don't even know about. There's plenty of different places where pregnancy can go wrong, and people tend to focus primarily on where it goes well, which nowadays, most of the time it does go well. We've come to a place where understanding is good enough to know how we can adjust things with physiology in order to make it go well more often. But it didn't used to be that way. And especially in the Bible, there likely were a lot more miscarriages and a lot more people that didn't survive childbirth. And it's a very difficult process to have go well. And yeah, the world that we live in, everything is not, it's not well designed for anything to physiologically go well. A lot of it's just, it accidentally just seems to work in a certain way. But yeah, I would agree with you that things are not statistically favorable in a lot of senses. And I mean, that just kind of goes into evolution, like how we get recurrences of things that are more likely to be favorable. And I think we're all in this room, I think we're all in agreement on that.
As a person who is currently almost exactly 7 months pregnant, I feel like it's been interesting for me. This is my second pregnancy that has gone fairly well. I'm extremely fortunate. And so I look at my healthy pregnancy. I still ended up being anemic. I still have, blood pressure that's low enough to need to be monitored. I still was nauseous for months and months on end, which is a good sign, I guess, that, if you're nauseous, you're less likely to miscarry, but it's a miserable good sign, gotta say, particularly if you already, have a child or are trying to do anything with your life at all, including get out of bed. I think about the fact that my nerves in my back are almost just crippled in pain every day by the end of the day. Like I can't really move very well because it hurts so badly. And it's just the weight of the baby pressing down is what I've sort of been told. I honestly feel like Dr. Wynn probably understands some of what's happening here better than I do, but my pregnancies are great. Nothing that happens in them risks my life or the life of the child that I'm gestating. And I'm grateful for that. But even with that, it's still miserable. Even with that, it still takes this incredibly high toll on my health as a whole. My hips are 2 inches wider than they were before my first child, which means that in that 16 hours of labor and 2.5 hours of pushing, I somehow expanded my bones. That's a bizarre thing to have happen to you and a bizarre thing to say. But when we talk about this is like best case scenario. I was able to give birth in a way that was relatively, pretty much uncomplicated. Nothing was going to be pretty crazy, too drastic or wrong. And this is still what happened. These are still some of the epic things that occurred within my body, let alone any kind of mental health consequence from not being able to get out of bed without puking for months and how that can be really stressful. Or just the fact that there's so many different hormones going on that you end up having sometimes very odd reactions to situations in your life. Pregnancy is hard when it's great. And so the idea that we're designed in any way for this to go well is totally bizarre to me.
Oh,
absolutely.
My wife and I had a really good pregnancy, and I say I as though I had much to do with it. It went really well. And even all of that, it still changes your body. It physically is taxing. It is a dangerous endeavor. Even some cultures in history have recognized that. The Spartans, you only got a gravestone if you died in battle or if you were a woman who died giving birth because you were sustaining the empire. And it's like even different cultures recognize these things were incredible. And it might be sexist to turn it to men fight on the battlefield, women fight in the birthing bed, but those are
I didn't take it that way.
Things for you, unless you get randomly ill.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too. I live in Texas, so of course, me being pregnant is something that I have to have a discussion every time about what we will do if something happens that cannot be medically dealt with here in Texas. And I am. Thank you. I realize that we are in such a fortunate situation in my little family that if we did need to terminate the pregnancy for whatever reason, I could leave. But I would have to come back to the state and not tell anyone what I had done because I would be a felon if I did that and I could be arrested. it's just a very strange thing to think about when I'm like, and this is like a fully wanted pregnancy, and I still could be punished if it goes wrong. And that's absolutely bizarre to me.
Ugh.
I know there's not much to say other than ugh about that. Yeah. And like I said, I'm fortunate. I feel like that's really, I can't even comment on other women's situations who have been experiencing miscarriages and might actually end up being prosecuted for a miscarriage, which for some reason pro-lifers like to pretend could never happen, and yet absolutely has, you know?
I think they don't examine the end result of their beliefs. Like, if you want something enforced by law, then you need a mechanism by which to investigate it. Because we're not just going to go back to witch trials and accusations. Hopefully we don't. But
I know, you're like, we're not. And I'm like,
yeah.
That one might be the one faith thing I believe in, is like, I think there's enough people here who think and use their brains. I really don't know that there are, but I sure hope there are. Because even if we do the things that they want, it's like, okay, how? You have to design a system now. You don't just get to go, I want a thing, tell me how you're going to make it happen. And I can tell you whether or not that's probably a good thing or not. But if you don't even know how, and that thing sounds unreasonable, then I don't even want to try and engage with the concept at all. Like, that doesn't sound like a good idea to do. Like, you can't even tell me how to make it happen that would make it seem okay.
Yeah, the problem is they just start pulling the trigger on things and they happen, and they don't understand who are the victims of the consequences of these things. They don't care enough to look into it more. And it's unfortunate because, like, there are plenty of reasons why you would need an emergency termination. Or even a non-emergency termination if there are conditions that leave you at such high risk for complications. Like, if you asked anybody, like, if you had let's take even a small risk, like 10%, like if you had a 10% risk that you could absolutely just die in your pregnancy, and there'd be nothing that we could do to help you, would you take that risk for yourself? But more importantly, would you want somebody else to make that decision for you? Like, when you understand what is at stake here, it's hard to say that you would oppose rights for other people, because, yeah, I might be willing to take a 10%, but somebody else might absolutely not be willing to take that 10%. And if that 10%, like, for example, one of the big scenarios that seems to be complicated, people with connective tissue diseases such as Marfan's, Ehlers-Danlos, etc. If you have a condition where too much pressure on your aorta can cause it to explode, like literally, you can get a dissection of your aorta that can kill you very, very quickly. If you have a connective tissue disease where your blood vessels cannot hold up to that kind of pressure, you have a significantly high risk of that happening during a pregnancy. And just by the amount of blood flow that you have to accumulate to compensate for the space that has to get blood flow, like, within the baby, but also the pressure from the baby itself and it growing and taking up that space. If you had that option of, like, you have this amount of chance, and I think it's small, I think it's around the 10% range, but I could be wrong. Like, if you have that risk, would you want somebody else making that decision for you? Like, okay, you could either terminate this pregnancy, or you can have this risk that your aorta is going to explode and there's nothing we can do to help you. That's a choice you have to make.
God, I wouldn't be going to work with a 10% mortality rate. You got to go do your job. No, I don't. There's a 10% chance I die. I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Well, and I think too about factoring in that when you have previous children, you know, like, I'm the second of 4 kids between my parents, and I have a toddler already. So if somebody told me that now, I think I wouldn't choose to go for the 10% anyway, personally. But I absolutely would say no, because there is an extant child here that I could assist and that like needs me as I already am. So the idea that like not only people making that choice for you, but they're making that choice for your whole family. This whole system is going to be impacted by whatever happens to you. And that is just incredibly heartbreaking to think that somebody would choose that.
And you're not only making that choice for those people who get to say whether or not they get a choice, you're also making the choice for the doctors that would have to intervene in those ways. Like if you make it a felony to perform an emergency termination, then you're going to have fewer people that are willing to do it, and you're putting them on the line for if they do it. But then effectively, for the people who need those options available, let's say somebody takes that chance, that 10% chance for themselves, and they can't get help. Like if it comes to be that they need those procedures, you're now increasing their chances of harm, because now you're limiting their ability to be helped in those cases. So it's eliminating really every safeguard that we have in this process for lots of people. And people don't understand, like they think it's a black and white issue of either you get an abortion or you don't, like either your baby dies or they don't. And that's not the discussion. There's so much more layers of nuance here. And the fact that we don't have people who understand weighing in on these issues is incredibly problematic. It like if I were to weigh in and decide I'm going to make decisions for everybody else about their finances, and like I want to start regulating banks, like nobody wants that. I can promise you, nobody wants that, because I will just ignore it and I don't know anything about the economy. So like, why would I be the right choice for this? I wouldn't, but I understand that. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't understand that medicine is similar, that like you can't just pretend to know it and then get away with it and then say, oh, well, this thing got messed up, but it's their fault. And also I wasn't trained. So how do you expect me to know? So like, if you weren't trained and we can't expect you to know, then why are you stepping into this position of leadership and making the decisions? Like,
because
just
God told them to, because
I'm actually a nurse in Ohio. I really get that. It particularly as someone who cares about other people and literally cares for other people, trying to dictate what part of that job is against my better knowledge, or in this case, a doctor's better knowledge, is almost like enforced apathy. Imagine seeing someone who needs help, who absolutely needs it, and being told helping that person is a crime. None of us would allow that. Like it's the ramifications of what they want, but they don't seem to like conceptualize it. And it's so wild to me for people to either not have an imagination or just no forethought. Like the thing you want will have to have rules. So the rules are going to be the problems that we encounter along the way. You know, it isn't just one thing. It's the whole system you want. And that system looks bad. And they don't seem to really, they're just like, well, but I like the thing. And it's like, but you could do that just for you. You don't have to get one. But why tell me what I can do? It's this interesting thing where they want their own freedom, but they also want the freedom to tell you what to do, despite that being the opposite of freedom.
I mean, this idea that if you feel God has told you that you have the answer, and it doesn't matter what the practicalities of it. It doesn't matter what medical professionals say. It doesn't matter the fact that you're going to be requiring people who are caregivers to not actually help those in dire need, because this is what God said. And it doesn't matter that we can track exactly when God started saying that, apparently historically, and that it was absolutely a political movement and came from political ideologies. And the issue of abortion has been used to manipulate voters for almost generations at this point. None of that matters, because to this, imaginary legislator or voter, it's just this idea of well, God said it, so anything we're saying becomes irrelevant in light of that, which I find so deeply disturbing. And I think even when I was a Christian, I found that confusing, that God is okay with suffering, I guess, in this way. And God is okay with us inflicting it because this one issue that we've all decided matters more than any other is on the table. It's divinely mandated cruelty at that point.
It's what it feels like. I grew up raised Catholic. My mother's Catholic, and I never got even really past like the first communion stage of belief in God, because one of the first things in Catholicism, for people who don't know, is you do your first communion. It's like second grade. You get all dressed up. There's a big thing. It's like a little tiny kid quinceañera. It's a lot of fun. It's nice. You get your family together. You get food. You get to dress up. You get a picture taken. But one of the things is you have to go to the priest and you have to confess your sins. And I'm 8 at this point, and I'm like, I don't know what sins. Like I've done bad things, but I've also expressed remorse and tried to atone. I don't feel the need to tell that to this guy. I feel like God would understand. Yeah, don't punch your little brother, but he was annoying me. Don't do it anyway. And like, I'm like, okay, you're right, God. I probably shouldn't punch him, but I'm a little kid. Like it's this weird idea to me that God is both a loving, caring father who will then uber punish you. Like, but that's bad. Like guys, if we put all of God's qualities into a person and then let that person do things, that person's going right to jail. They're going to The Hague.
Right. Like it's like I'm gonna set you up to fail. I'm gonna absolutely set you up to fail, and then when you fail, I'm gonna say it's your fault, and I'm gonna punish you for eternity. Like that's what happened. That's incredibly abusive.
It seems so evil. It seems evil on its face.
Yeah, and when you think about if you grow up in a family that talks a lot about sin, then it's almost like, well, that's of course what the Heavenly Father would do. That's what your earthly parents are doing. If you're talking about sin all the time, and there's this assumption that a 7-year-old can be possessed by a mermaid demon, or that you can commit sin before you understand the idea of even right or wrong, then you're sort of being set up to fail by your parents here. You're getting punished for sinning when you're a small child, as Georgia Purdom of Answers in Genesis referred to her 4-year-old as a dirty sinner, which for some reason made me laugh just because she included the word dirty. I'm like, you could have just said she's a sinner. Anyway, but it's like, so of course the Heavenly Father, that makes sense because that's what's happening inside of your home too, right? Which is also heart-wrenching. On that super depressing note, we have another caller I really want to get to, but I have so appreciated talking with you, Rob. You are delightful, and I appreciate your perspective.